I love them. I've always loved them. Everything I've done has been with their best interest. And I'm sorry I wasn't the mother that they wanted me or needed me to be, but I did the best I could. And all my time, everything I did was for the girls, even if it was toilet papering houses with them, doing stupid stuff. We went to the movies, we did everything together. I regret lots of things. I regret not having a filter on my mouth. I regret how I lived my life. I regret that I wasn't a better mother. I regret that I didn't discipline my kids. I regret a lot of things. I regret a lot of things. It's still hard. I mean, I advocate for the other ladies in here, and I go through hell in here because I can't keep my mouth shut, and I always help the underdog, and I'm still picking up strays in here. But I try to help everybody, and it's still difficult in here. I just wish with all the new laws and everything coming out that somebody would come forward and help me, because it's not right that she did 10 years. Even if they do believe that I asked her to do it, it's not right that I'm spending the rest of my life in prison and she did 10 years as the shooter.
Imagine losing your biological dad, then building a solid, loving relationship with a man who becomes your stepfather, only for him to be tragically shot by your mother's secret girlfriend. The girlfriend's arrested and is silent about her reasons for shooting this man. The police believe that there's a second killer, and while choosing a casket, your mother tells you that she's going to be purchasing pink caskets for you and your twin sister. I mean, terrified is what I would be feeling. This case is all kinds of crazy, but these twin sisters make it out alive to tell their story, and I'm going to be giving you all the details. If you haven't already, go grab yourself a cup of coffee, because it's time for your true crime coffee break here on Crime Cafe with Krysten Quinn. Celeste Beard, or maiden name Johnson, was born on February 13th, 1963 in Ventura County, California. She had a tough upbringing. She met her biological mother just one time, and she said to her, "I'm not your mother, I was just your incubator." She lived with her adoptive parents, Edwin and Nancy Johnson. Celeste claims that she was sexually abused by her adoptive father from ages 4 to 12, and her adoptive mother was psychologically unstable and was institutionalized several times. Celeste says that she was also sexually abused by her older adopted brother. It's because of this abusive past Celeste made an attempt to end her life in her early teenage years. Celeste met and married Craig Bratcher at just 17 years old, and that is when she had her twin girls, Jennifer and Christina. Celeste and Craig's marriage became extremely toxic, and they quickly chose to go their separate ways. This was insanely hard for the girls because their parents actually decided to have a split where they would actually break up the girls as well, and Jennifer would go with her dad and Christina stayed with her mom. And sometimes it would be like a year for these girls to be separated from each other, and I can't even imagine being away that long from my siblings, let alone a twin. After Celeste's first failed marriage, she quickly married Harold Wolf, an Air Force mechanic, and they were divorced just as quickly as they got married. It's during this divorce that Celeste claims that her divorce lawyer, after it was all said and done, actually paid for her breast augmentation. She then moved to Arizona, and she was really struggling to make ends meet. She ended up in a little bit of trouble, and she actually got arrested for burning her car that she had actually reported stolen. She was convicted of insurance fraud and spent 3 months in jail and owed a pretty big restitution fine. She then met Jimmy Martinez. This would be husband number 3. But like her previous marriages, it ended pretty quickly in divorce again. At this point, it's 1993. Celeste is in her 30s and she's living in Sutton, Texas. She is a waitress at the Austin Country Club. So a couple who was a regular at the club were Stephen and Elise Beard. Elise was diagnosed with cancer, and within that year, on October 3rd, she passed away. So Stephen Beard really didn't like being alone, and he knew that. So he very quickly reached out to Celeste. They had their first date 3 weeks after Elise had passed. Stephen took Celeste to a high-end Italian restaurant and then back home to his mini mansion. Stephen Beard was 68 and Celeste was 30, but they seemed to hit it off very, very quickly. Stephen Beard grew up in Texas and served in the Navy Air Corps. He went to college at Texas Christian and Southern Methodist and eventually got a job in radio and advertising in Dallas during the 50s and 60s. He later switched to television in the 70s, and by 1981, he became extremely successful as a partner and general manager of KBVO in Austin, Texas. In 1985, the station became one of the original affiliates of the Fox network. It grew in value over the following decade, and he later sold his share for a small fortune. Stephen immediately started spending money on Celeste. The Christmas after they met, so just about 2 months, they were together. He gave Celeste a $16,000 diamond cocktail ring, a $3,000 watch, and a new Ford Explorer. He also asked her to move in with him. It was on January 1st, 1994. She moved in with him. Within their first year together, Stephen paid off Celeste's restitution fine, which was a total of $20,000. After 13 months together, they decided to get married, and Stephen wanted to do a prenup. So they decided that if they were to ever get divorced, then Celeste would get $500,000. But if she was to become widowed, she would get a lot more. And on February 18th of 1995, Celeste and Stephen got married where they first met, at the Austin Country Club. In 1996, Jennifer was staying at her mom's to visit with her and her sister when she was notified that her dad, Craig, had waited till she left and was with her mom while he took his own life. This would change the entire dynamic of their family. Of course, this crushed them that their dad did this, but they were very ecstatic to be together, and Stephen loved being their stepdad. He even took it upon himself to officially adopt them. So he really did treat them like his own. It was in 1999 that the couple really started to argue over Celeste's spending. So Stephen gave Celeste a $10,000 a month allowance. I mean, $10,000 a month. And that wasn't enough for her. She had 3 walk-in closets, clothes that she probably forgot about, hundreds of pairs of shoes, and a purse to match every single one of those shoes. She would throw extravagant, expensive parties for her friends, and within 4 years, Celeste easily spent over $1 million. And all of this came to a head when Stephen had a meeting with his accountant, and he told him that Celeste spent over $300,000 on the previous year's holiday. Just during the holiday season for gifts and partying and events and things like that, she spent over $300,000. Stephen told Celeste that he was going to take her credit cards away, and she told him that she was going to end her life. They thought it was a good idea for Celeste to get some psychiatric help, and Stephen paid for her to go to St. David's Pavilion in March of 1999. And this is where Celeste meets Tracy. Tracy Tarleton was a daughter of a Fort Worth lawyer and graduated from Texas A&M in 1986 with a biology degree. She worked in several natural resources jobs with the government before getting hired at Book People in 1994 in downtown Austin. She was really dedicated to her job and worked 60 hours a week. Her workplace became like a home to her, and she felt like her coworkers were like family. She opened up to them about being homosexual, and she was happy to be so comfortable with them. She was really good at her job, and she was promoted to manager. She earned regional notice in the book world and appeared on C-SPAN to talk about books, and was also in the newspaper numerous times promoting book releases. It was in February of 1999 that Tracy had a public mental breakdown at work and was yelling and threatened violence. Her friends and family convinced her to check herself into St. David's Pavilion. So the two of them were both transferred to Timberlawn in Texas, and Tracy immediately fell for Celeste. They became a little bit of a problem in the facility. The staff caught them together, and they had to work really hard to keep them separated. Tracy said that, quote, Celeste was extra flirtatious with me from the beginning. I responded in kind. Eventually, she came into my room and kissed me. She wanted to have a sexual relationship with me, end quote. A few weeks later, Tracy wrote Celeste a love letter that said, quote, "Celeste, you are so beautiful. I think about your long, silky body and incredible long legs, and I just can't stand it. And then I think of your incredible face, and I want to stand outside your building and wail until I get arrested. We won't even talk about what happens when I think of your sweet, tough, sexy voice," end quote. Tracy said that her and Celeste had sex for the first time on March 20th, 1999. So it was right when they got there. And it continued until October 1st of that year, the day before Stephen was shot.
Ambulance, what's an emergency? Hello?
Hurry, my gut just jumped out of my stomach.
How did you...
They blew out of my stomach.
Okay, sir, how did...
I had an awful pain.
How did this happen?
It's nothing. I've been sleeping. I just woke up.
Sir, okay, are you there by yourself?
My wife is somewhere in the house. I can't find her.
So as you can hear, Stephen has no idea what happened to him. He says that his guts flew out of his stomach, that he's in awful pain, and that he just woke up like that. So not only is he completely confused on what happened, the operator isn't understanding what happened either. When an ambulance gets to his house, they find it locked with no lights on. And Stephen did tell the operator that Celeste was staying in a different section of the house that night. So he asked them to call Celeste. Celeste didn't answer the phone call, so EMS actually broke into the patio door to get to Stephen. As they were checking on him, they didn't know what happened either, and they concluded that maybe an incision from a previous hernia operation busted, and that's what happened. During all this time, Celeste wakes up on her own, and she hears people outside, she hears people in the house, and she runs and gets her daughter. Christina. Jennifer was not at home at the time, and she says to Christina, someone's outside and trying to get in. So Christina gets her phone and she calls 911, and that's when the operator is telling her that it's the police that are trying to get into their home. So they open the door and they are bombarded with questions about where her dad is, and when they lead them to him upstairs in his room, they realize that the EMTs are actually already in the house working on him. And this is when they move him from the bed to the stretcher, and the sheriff sees that there is a shell casing on the floor by the bed. So they finally realize that he's been shot. They get him into a life flight helicopter and they fly him to the nearest hospital. Christina, of course, calls her sister and tells her what's going on, and that the police found a shell casing and their dad's been shot, and she meets them at the hospital. And when they're walking into the hospital, it's Celeste, Jennifer, and Christina. Celeste actually turns to Jennifer and says, "Don't mention Tracy." Little did Celeste know that Tracy will be mentioned by plenty of people. The people that mentioned Tracy were calling her Crazy Tracy to the investigators. And it was just 2 days later that the investigators were showing up at Tracy's door, and they asked her if she had a 20 gauge shotgun, and she said that she did, and they wanted to see it, and reluctantly she gave it to them. It had her name engraved on the side, and it was actually a gift from her father, and they were able to test it and compare it to the shell casing that they found at the house, and a couple days later it came back that it was a match. So on October 8th, just 6 days after Stephen was shot, Tracy was officially arrested. During this time, Stephen was fighting for his life. He underwent 7 surgeries, and against all odds, he began making a gradual recovery. He was released from the hospital, but still being high risk for infections due to the nature of the wound and where it was located. He continued to take antibiotics while at home to keep any infections away, and his recovery seemed to be going well. He was released on January 21st, 2000, and just 4 days later, he succumbed to his injuries and passed away at home. During his last few months alive, prior to being shot, Celeste spent $321,000 during the months of October and November, and $249,000 by December 10th, and then another $100,000 in the weeks following his death. All the while, Tracy was not saying a word. The police had their eyes on Celeste, and they were convinced that Tracy was not a lone murderer. The prosecutors offered plea bargains, and they waited and pushed her court date out for over an entire year because they were hoping that she would implicate Celeste in the murder, but she never did. She never spoke up. So Tracy was finally indicted for murder on February 16, 2001. Celeste and Tracy made contact pretty regularly for the first 9 months that Tracy was in jail. But in the summer of 2000, they decided to end the relationship. Tracy said, quote, Celeste started going bananas, hysterical a lot of the time. We both said we were not going to do this anymore. You won't see me again, end quote. Tracy was extremely upset about this and somehow overdosed on Valium, but she still didn't implicate Celeste. But she could only take so much, and all of that would change in the upcoming weeks when Tracy was in jail and she was reading the newspaper the one day. And she came upon an article that was talking about Celeste getting married to a man named Cole Johnson. And this is the moment that Tracy realized that she was used. Tracy said, quote, she's off at her honeymoon in Aspen. Even I couldn't overlook that. It was like everything started unraveling very quickly for me after that article. I started realizing Celeste had been lying to me all along, that this man was not abusing her, that she married him for his money, and she had been lying to me about our relationship. All of it was a farce, end quote. So Tracy decided that she was going to tell prosecutors her side of the story. She told them how she did it all for Celeste. Quote, I just saw this woman that I loved in a desperate situation trying to find a way to survive this man. That was so awful. She had a plan. She wanted me to shoot him at Toro Canyon with my shotgun. I was willing to shoot him, and I went and did it, end quote. Celeste was arrested on March 28th, 2002, and finally charged with Stephen's murder. A judge set her bail at $8 million. A few months later, she was indicted for another felony. Apparently, she was trying to hire her friend Donna Goodson to murder Tracy. When the trial began, the witnesses helped piece the entire story together. It was said that Celeste really never loved Stephen. Her daughters and friends said that she would refer to Stephen as, quote, the fat bastard, or, quote, the old fool. And she was heard several times saying, quote, why doesn't he just die already? Stephen had what they called a weekend house, and when he was still alive, Celeste started to spend more and more time at the weekend house. This is when she not only continued her relationship with Tracy, but she actually rekindled her relationship with her ex-husband, Jimmy Martinez. Her daughter said that sometimes Celeste would sneak out of the house when Stephen would fall asleep, and if he wasn't falling asleep fast enough, she would crush some sleeping pills and put that in his food or his drink. And once he would fall asleep, she would sneak out and either go to be with Tracy or Jimmy, or she would go party with friends. The twins actually caught Celeste and Tracy together, like laying in bed together. And when they asked their mom about this, she just said, quote, Tracy is a lesbian and she's in love with me. Isn't that funny? But the girls said they also witnessed their mother kissing Tracy as well. Celeste would tell Tracy that Stephen was an abusive and controlling husband and that he would belittle her constantly. He would taunt her and beat her down emotionally, and that she feared it would get physical if she ever tried to leave him. After hearing this multiple times, Celeste and Tracy started to plot their way of getting Stephen out of the picture and Celeste out of this supposed horrific relationship. They actually had a couple different ideas that they tried but failed at. They spiked his drink with 190 proof grain alcohol, and then when he passed out from it, they actually fastened a plastic bag around his head. I don't know if they were trying to suffocate him, or I don't know. I'm assuming. They sprinkled his food with sleeping pills and 10 ecstasy pills, and he survived both of those situations. It was that September that Celeste really started pushing for something to happen. Celeste and Stephen were supposed to go on a month-long trip to Europe, and she kept saying to Tracy that she really didn't want to go. She was afraid to go. And Tracy said, quote, she came over and was just hysterical, beside herself. She said, I'll never survive this trip. I wanted to help her, end quote. And this is when they thought of the shotgun plan. Celeste set everything up for Tracy. Once everyone was asleep, she had the doors unlocked. She slept in a different part of the mini mansion. And during that, Tracy slipped in, shot Stephen and slipped right back out. During the trial, Tracy took the witness stand for 15 hours over 3 days, and she told the details of the affair and the murder plot. Tracy took a deal for herself. She agreed to testify against Celeste, and she took a deal for a 20-year sentence. Celeste's defense team tried to say that Tracy was crazy and that she had mental issues and that the relationship actually never happened. She was just obsessed with Celeste, just very delusional about her. He claimed that the relationship between the two of them was it was completely fabricated, which was, of course, completely debunked through the entire court process. So many people saw them together. Tracy was very vocal about having this relationship with Celeste. She told everyone at work about Celeste and that they were in love. And the two of them even had a counseling session together. And during that counseling session, Celeste actually told the psychologist that she was questioning if she even was homosexual because she actually had to get drunk to be with Tracy in that way. And the prosecution made sure to mention that with the result of Stephen's death, Celeste stood to get $6 million. The jurors deliberated for 23 hours over a 3-day period, and they came back with a guilty verdict. Celeste was denied her inheritance, and instead it was split between Stephen's children, his biological children and his adopted children, the twins. By Texas law, Celeste must serve 40 years in prison, and she won't be eligible for parole until she is 80 years old. In the courtroom, Stephen's son spoke directly at Celeste, saying, quote, "I hope you burn in hell." And Christina said to her mother, quote, "You say we turned against you. Well, you turned on us. You turned on the whole Beard family. He let you into his home, loved you, honored and obeyed you, and you violated him and murdered him. Shame on you." End quote. Celeste still continued to deny any involvement in Stephen's death. Celeste clearly has many, many mental issues. I think that she went through marriages and divorced the ones that she couldn't take advantage of, and she found Stephen, who was in a different part of his life and didn't want to spend the rest of his life alone, and he just wanted to, be happy and live and have a partner, and took care of her children, adopted her children, and she completely took advantage of him and ultimately took his life for money. But now she gets to rot where she's at. She is a terrible human being. Terrible. I feel for all the kids in this, Stephen's children, and of course the twins. I can't imagine losing your biological dad to having another man step in and be a great father figure and love you to the point where he adopts you and takes care of you and your sister, and just to have your mother destroy everything. I feel for all of them. It's a terrible situation. So let me know what you think of this case. And like always, if you have any case suggestions at all, leave them in the comments below. But that is all I have for tonight. Until our next true crime coffee break, please stay safe, and thank you so much for your time. Bye.